There is a certain kind of loneliness that does not announce itself. It does not arrive with tears or a trembling voice. It settles quietly, the way dust settles on a windowsill you have stopped looking through. It becomes part of the air you breathe without you ever noticing that something has changed. This is a story about that kind of loneliness, and about the small, almost invisible moments that can break it open. It begins on a Tuesday morning, which is, perhaps, the most ordinary day of the week. Not the dread of Monday, not the anticipation of Friday. Just Tuesday, gray and unremarkable, the kind of morning where the world smells like cold pavement and someone else's coffee. His name was Leonard. He was 63 years old, and he rode the number 47 bus every single morning without exception. He had been doing this for 11 years, ever since his wife, Marion, had gently suggested that perhaps at his age, with his knees the way they were, the morning walk to the office was doing more harm than good. He had argued, of course. He always argued with Marion, not because he disagreed with her, but because the arguing was a form of conversation, and conversation with her had always felt like breathing. Marion had been gone for 2 years now. Leonard still rode the bus. He sat in the same seat every morning, third row from the front, window side, right. He had chosen it originally because from that position, he could see just enough of the street to feel connected to the world moving outside without being fully exposed to it. He was a man who had always preferred to observe things at a slight remove. Marion used to tease him about this. She called it his anthropologist habit, the way he would sit at parties and watch the room rather than work it. He never minded. He liked watching. He liked knowing that the world was full of people living lives he would never fully understand. Every morning, Leonard placed his bag on the aisle seat beside him, not because he was the kind of person who did not want company. He had simply stopped expecting any. And when you stop expecting something, your body begins to act accordingly without asking your permission first. The other passengers on the 47 were a rotating cast of familiar strangers. There was the young woman with the enormous headphones who always mouthed the lyrics to whatever she was listening to. Her expression so pure and unguarded it sometimes made Leonard's chest ache. There was the man in the delivery uniform who fell asleep within 30 seconds of sitting down, and somehow always woke up exactly at his stop, as though his body had its own internal map of the city. There was a group of schoolchildren on Wednesdays who flooded the back rows with noise and energy, and the specific kind of joy that belongs only to people who have not yet learned that the world will eventually ask something hard of them. Leonard watched them all. He knew none of their names. He had tried in the early months after Marion died to be different. He had taken a grief counseling class at the community center. He had attended 2 sessions before he stopped, not because it wasn't helping, but because sitting in a circle of folding chairs talking about loss felt, somehow, like talking about Marion in a language she would have found too clinical. Marion had believed in saying the real thing. She believed that if you were sad, you should say, "I am so sad I feel like the inside of me has gone hollow," and not, "I am processing my grief." She was a woman who had no patience for the euphemism of pain. He missed her in the way you miss the sun in winter, not dramatically, just constantly. It was on a Thursday in October that everything shifted. The morning was sharper than the days before it, the kind of autumn air that has teeth in it, that reminds you the year is preparing to let go of something. Leonard boarded the bus at 7:42, nodded at the driver, a quiet man named, according to his badge, Dennis, and made his way to the 3rd row. There was a woman sitting in his seat. He stopped. This had never happened before. In 11 years, no one had ever sat in the 3rd row, window side, right, on a Thursday morning. He stood there for a moment, his bag held in front of him like something he had forgotten the purpose of, and he looked at her. She was perhaps 70, though with some people age is more a suggestion than a fixed point. She had short silver hair cut close to her head, a practical haircut, not vain but not careless either. She wore a wool coat the color of dark green, and she was holding a small potted plant in her lap. A succulent, perhaps, or something with thick, determined-looking leaves. She was looking out the window at the street going by, and her expression was so entirely self-contained that Leonard felt, for a moment, as though he had come across someone reading in a private room. He took the seat across the aisle, third row, window side left. He told himself it did not matter. They rode in silence for several minutes. The bus filled and emptied at each stop, people flowing in and out with the carelessness of water. Leonard looked out his own window. The city was doing its morning routine. The bakeries rolling up their shutters, the garbage trucks making their slow, meditative progress down side streets, a man walking a dog so small it barely qualified as a mammal. He became aware, after a while, that the woman with the plant was speaking. "It's a jade plant," she said. He turned. She was looking at him now, not unkindly, with the sort of direct gaze that people develop either from spending a great deal of time alone or from spending a great deal of time with others. He could not yet tell which. "I'm sorry," he said. "You were looking at it," she said. "The plant. I thought you might be wondering. It's a jade plant. I'm bringing it to my daughter. She keeps killing her plants and I keep replacing them. I don't know why I bother, really. I suppose because the alternative is letting her live in a home with no living things in it, and that seems like giving up." Leonard looked at the plant and then back at her, and he said the first true thing that came to him. "My wife had a jade plant," he said, "on the kitchen windowsill. It lived for about 15 years. I killed it within 4 months of her passing. I didn't mean to. I just kept forgetting." The woman looked at him steadily. She did not offer condolences in the rushed way people sometimes do, the way that is more about their own discomfort than your grief. She simply nodded once, slow and real. "How long?" she asked. 2 years, he said, "in March." "I'm 5 years out," she said. "My husband. And I will tell you because no one told me and I wish they had that 2 years is still very close. You're still in it. 5 years you're out of it mostly. But you carry a version of it with you always, like a stone in your coat pocket. You stop noticing the weight most of the time, but then some days you put the coat on and you feel it and you think, oh yes, that's still there." Leonard looked at her. He felt something shifting inside his chest, the particular kind of movement that happens when something that has been held very still for a long time is finally allowed to move. "That's a very honest thing to say to a stranger," he said. "I've stopped being dishonest about hard things," she said simply. "It takes too much energy and I need what I have." Her name, he would learn over the following weeks, was Ruth. She rode the 47 every Thursday morning to visit her daughter, who lived on the west side of the city. She was a retired school librarian. She had 3 children, 5 grandchildren, 1 remaining cat named Ptolemy, and a small but genuine collection of mechanical clocks that her husband had left behind, which she wound every Sunday morning the way some people attend a religious service, with care and with ritual, and with something she was not entirely sure she could name. They did not exchange numbers that first Thursday. They simply rode together to their respective stops, talking the way people talk when they have somehow, inexplicably, given each other permission to be real. When Ruth's stop came, she stood, adjusted the jade plant under her arm, and looked at Leonard with that same direct gaze. "Next Thursday," she said. It was not quite a question. "Next Thursday," he said. He watched her step off the bus and make her way along the pavement with the purposeful walk of a woman who has always known where she is going, even when she was not entirely sure. And he felt something he had not felt in a very long time, a small but unmistakable current of something that was not hope exactly, but was in the same family as hope. He moved back to his seat, third row, window side right. Over the weeks that followed, Thursday became the pivot around which Leonard organized his week, not in a way he acknowledged to himself, not at first, but he noticed that on Wednesday nights he slept a little better. He noticed that on Thursday mornings he took more care than usual with the way he dressed. He told himself these things were unrelated to anything in particular. He was not a man who examined his own feelings with great rigor. Marion had done that for him, or rather with him, asking the questions that led him gently to the places inside himself he would not have found alone. Without her, he had become used to the silence of his own interior, vast and undisturbed. Ruth disturbed it. Not loudly, not the way grief had disturbed it, that violent, oceanic intrusion. Ruth disturbed it the way a small stone disturbs a still pond, with precision, with a ripple that spread out slowly and reached the edges of things he had forgotten were there. She told him about her husband, a man named George who had worked as a civil engineer and had a talent for laughter that made everyone in a room feel welcome, who had spent the last 2 years of his life with the particular grace of someone who understands that dignity is a choice you make each morning, and that some mornings are harder than others. She told him about her daughter, the one with the plant-killing habit, who was also brilliant and loving and deeply convinced that the world was more broken than it was, a conviction Ruth found exhausting and also, on her clearest days, entirely understandable. Leonard told her things he had not told anyone. He told her about the morning he had found Marion's reading glasses on the kitchen counter 3 months after she died, still folded, still carrying the small pressure marks of her nose on the bridge, and how he had stood there holding them for a very long time without being able to put them down or put them away. He told her about the way he still made 2 cups of tea in the morning and had to throw one away, because the habit of it was so much older and deeper than the grief. He told her that he was not sure he knew who he was any more outside of being Marion's husband, and that he suspected this was something he needed to figure out, but that he had not yet found the courage to begin. Ruth listened the way good listeners do, without rushing to fix or explain or redirect. She simply received what he said as though it was the truest thing she had heard in a long time, because it was. "You're still her husband," she said one Thursday, when the leaves outside the bus windows had gone fully gold and were beginning to let go. "That doesn't stop. You're just also someone who has to figure out what else he is. Those are not the same problem." He thought about that for a long time after. There was a Thursday in November when Ruth was not on the bus. Leonard sat in the 3rd row, window side, right, and looked at the seat across the aisle, and the small planet of his ordinary morning tilted on its axis in a way he had not expected. He got off at his stop and went about his day, and it was fine. It was perfectly fine, but there was the stone in his pocket, suddenly very heavy. She returned the following Thursday with an apology about a doctor's appointment she had forgotten to mention, and he found himself releasing a breath he had apparently been holding for 7 days, which was, he thought, rather a great deal of air. "You were worried," she said, reading him with the ease of someone who has spent many years learning to read people for a living. "I was not worried," he said, which was the kind of small, defensive untruth that means the precise opposite of what it says. She smiled at that. It was a smile that did not require him to revise his statement. Around Christmas, she invited him to her daughter's home for a Sunday afternoon, a casual gathering, she said, just family and a few friends, nothing that required anything from him. He said he would think about it. He went home and thought about it for 4 days and called the only number he had for her, a number she had slipped to him once on a small piece of paper with the matter-of-fact practicality of someone handling logistics rather than feelings, and told her yes. He went. It was loud and bright and full of the generous chaos of a family that loves each other with an occasional lack of finesse. Ruth's daughter, whose name was Pam, shook his hand warmly and said, "You're the bus man," in a tone that suggested she had been told about him, which filled him with a feeling he could not quite categorize, but which was not unpleasant. He sat in a corner for a while, watching, his old anthropologist habit. But then Ruth's youngest grandchild, A girl of about 7 named Sarah, with the absolute conviction of someone who has never yet been told that approaching strangers is complicated, climbed onto the armrest beside him and asked him if he knew any card tricks. He did not know any card tricks, but he knew how to make a coin appear to disappear between his fingers. Something Marion had taught him on a rainy afternoon 30 years ago when they were stuck inside, and she had decided he needed a skill he had not planned on acquiring. He showed Sarah. Sarah was astonished. She demanded to be shown again, and then again. And then she ran across the room to show her brother, and Leonard sat in his corner and felt something warm moving through him, quiet and slow and entirely unexpected. Ruth appeared beside him with 2 cups of tea. She sat down and handed him one and looked out at the room the way he was looking at it, the two of them side by side, watching the same world. "You're smiling," she said. "I suppose I am," he said. They sat like that for a while, and it was the most natural thing. He has not stopped riding the number 47 bus. He still sits in the 3rd row, window side, right. But he no longer places his bag on the aisle seat beside him. He has stopped saving that space for the emptiness he had grown so practiced at protecting. On Thursdays, Ruth sits across from him. On other mornings, sometimes someone he has never met before takes that seat, and he lets them, and occasionally they speak, and occasionally they don't, and either way, something is different now. He is different now. Not fixed, not finished, not in any way that makes grief a solved problem, but different the way a window is different when you finally open it. The same window, the same room, but something moves through it now that wasn't moving before. He thinks about Marion every day. He thinks about her reading glasses on the counter. He thinks about the jade plant he forgot to water. He has bought a new one, a small, stout thing with thick green leaves that sits on his kitchen windowsill and which he has been, so far, carefully keeping alive. It is not a grand gesture. It is just a small, daily act of paying attention to something living. He thinks that might be what all of it comes down to. Not the grand resolutions or the dramatic transformations, just the daily choice to pay attention, to notice the person across the aisle, to let a child show you something about the coin trick you already know, to say the true thing when the true thing is asked for, to keep the seat next to you open. Grief does something interesting to a person if you give it time and treat it with enough honesty. It teaches you, eventually, that love is not the opposite of loss. Love is what remains after the loss has moved through you, what is left standing on the other side, real and permanent and still reaching out its hand. Leonard learned this on a bus. Not in a moment of revelation, not in a dramatic turning point, but in the slow accumulation of Thursday mornings, of shared tea and honest words and a jade plant being carried across the city to someone who keeps killing plants, but who has a mother who keeps believing she can learn to keep them alive. He learned it the way all the most important things are learned, quietly, in transit, between one stop and the next. There is a seat beside you. You have been keeping it for the weight of what you have lost, for the shape of the absence, for the grief that told you it deserved the whole space. And maybe it did for a while. Maybe that was right and necessary and even sacred. But there comes a morning, gray and ordinary, when you look at that empty seat and you think, what if I let it be just a seat again? What if I let someone sit there, not to replace what was, but to become what is? The bus is still moving. The city is still turning. There are still whole lives happening outside every window, lives full of jade plants and card tricks and stones in coat pockets, and the particular warmth of a cup of tea handed to you by someone who has learned, the hard way, how to be present. The seat is there, the morning is here, the rest is up to you.